Jonathan Broyhill and Jamie Hahn were best friends. John stood up for Nate as the best man at his wedding. Years later, Nate's wife, Jamie, gave John a job. As his health took a turn for the worse, Jamie drove him to his doctor's appointments. They had standard Monday night dinners, but really, the three were together all the time. They were like family. When law enforcement descended upon the Hahn's neighborhood in North Raleigh on an otherwise quiet evening in April 2013, they found one of the bloodiest scenes that most had ever seen. By the end of that evening, all three friends were in hospital, and family, friends, and neighbors were left asking, how could this have possibly happened? Jamie Hahn was a student at the University of North Carolina in 2006, when his passion for politics compelled him to volunteer for a presidential campaign. Nate worked alongside other college students, volunteering to knock on doors and to help with events and rallies. He was eventually hired on as an intern. But it wasn't just his love of campaigning that kept Nation engaged. He had also developed a crush on his new boss, a young woman 2.5 years his senior, named Jamie Kirk. Nate and Jamie became good friends while they worked together. Each saw other people, but they stayed in touch over the following years. Jamie continued her career in politics after the 2008 elections and began working for a state senator, and Nate completed his university degree. After the two both found themselves free of their previous relationships, they thought they might spend some time together. Less than 5 months after their first kiss, they were engaged to be married. One of Nate's oldest friends, Jonathan Broyhill, stood up for him as best man at his wedding in 2009. John grew up in Lenore with Nation, and the two became friends in the Pentecostal church they both attended. Jamie and John had met early on in the young couple's relationship and had become fast friends. The group was so close, they had regular dinners at the Hahn's home. And in 2010, when John was out of work, Jamie decided to help out by offering him a role in her business, a political consultancy called Sky Blue Strategies. This worked out in the short term, but by the spring of 2013, Jamie had been unable to keep John on the payroll, and instead had been helping him to find another job. Struggling for work, it would seem, was not the only misfortune that John Broyhill would experience that year. After soldiering through a devastating diagnosis of multiple sclerosis in the summer of 2012, that winter, he was also complaining of problems with his gallbladder. He told friends about the surgery he needed to remove gallstones. Then, in early April, came the alarming news that doctors had discovered a spot when they removed his gallstones, a spot which they believed could be pancreatic cancer. He still required confirmation, but it was not looking good. Devastated, the Hahns comforted their friend, then cried for him in private. They believed that the diagnosis was a death sentence, and they were about to lose someone they loved very dearly. John had agreed to continue assisting Jamie in finalizing the accounts for a congressman's campaign that had been suspended. At 4:30 p.m. on Monday, April 22nd, John met Jamie at her house, ostensibly to address the outstanding account issues, but also so that she and Nate could take John to another doctor's appointment early the next morning. Nation greeted John in the kitchen with a hug and invited him to stay the night. John told him that he had his clothes packed with him for exactly that scenario. After their brief conversation, Nate proceeded upstairs to change out of his work clothes and into his running gear. Exactly what transpired in the following few minutes is a mystery, and one which would be hotly debated for years afterwards. Nation, hearing calls from his wife, rushed down the stairs. He found his best friend armed with a kitchen knife attacking Jamie. While Nate struggled with John to stop the attack, Jamie, already seriously injured, stumbled from the house. She was able to reach the doorstep of a neighbor, while her husband held off their friend and called to anyone within earshot to call 911. More than one neighbor heard the cries for help and did exactly that.
911, what's the location of your emergency?
Hey, we have an emergency at the Hillbriar Drive.
Okay, what's going on?
I got him on the phone.
What's going on?
I got him on the phone.
Ma'am, what's happening over there?
I don't know. There's a lady bleeding terribly.
Okay, how did
She looks like she's been shot.
Okay.
Has she been shot? I don't know. They're pressing on her stomach. It's all in her stomach.
No, the person who stabbed her, she's still there.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who it is. It's
Okay.
a lady that was running down the street, and she's been stabbed, and she's in the yard. The person's still in the house, and we need the police as soon as
Okay,
possible.
the police are coming as well. Is this the woman who's able to maybe give a description of the suspect?
Yeah, hold on real quick. Can you give a description of who it is? Yeah. What's the name?
John Broyhill.
John Broyhill?
J-O-N.
What's he wearing?
He's wearing a plaid
The police are here.
Police surrounded the Hahn's home and ordered John Broyhill to come outside. When he did, he moved calmly, with his hands in the air. Officer Roy Smith recounted later that he observed self-inflicted knife wounds on his wrists and a stab wound to his stomach. These injuries were visibly quite severe. The damage was not superficial. John was placed in an ambulance and brought to hospital under police supervision. As EMS workers spoke with him, John became visibly upset and began crying. He told them, "It's been a long time coming," and said repeatedly, "I just want to die." Jamie lost consciousness on her way to the hospital. She underwent emergency surgery, but would never wake up. She died 2 days later as a result of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she had sustained stab wounds to multiple areas, her back, but also her front torso. The wounds numbered in the dozens. Nation survived the attack, but with injuries primarily to his hands, where he had grabbed at the blade to fight off his friend, while calling for his wife to run from the house. As the emergency response transitioned into a murder investigation, crime scene analysts descended upon the property, seeking to map out, so far as it was possible, what exactly transpired. Inside the house, Raleigh police, joined by the City County Bureau of Identification, the CCBI, found a bloody and messy scene. It appeared that the altercation had occurred in the kitchen. On one side of a small dining set was the kitchen knife, the presumed murder weapon, abandoned on the floor. On the other side of the table, a chair had been knocked over, falling to rest upon a purse. There was a trail leading towards the living room, where a baby gate had been knocked over as well. John's backpack, full of his clothing to stay the night, sat on a stool in the living room area. The only item he had retrieved from the backpack appeared to be the kitchen knife. There was a less disturbance in the living room, suggesting that the altercation had backtracked to the kitchen, where a trail led out the side doorway. In the master bed, shoes and clothing sat out, presumably abandoned by Nate when he heard his wife's screams and ran down the stairs. The physical evidence showed an attack that began in the kitchen and spilled out from the doorway into the streets and to a neighbor's yard. Police placed evidence markers across the drive, into the street, and to a nearby home, spreading the crime scene across the neighborhood. In the days after the attack, John was interviewed by police on 3 separate occasions. Just before he was formally arrested and charged with the murder of Jamie and the attempted murder of Nation Hahn. In the final interview recorded by Detective Zeke Morse, his volume in the recording is barely above a whisper. John claimed to remember only pieces of what had happened at the house, but one of the memories that came back to him was of stabbing Jamie Hahn, repeatedly in the back. He also told detectives that he heard voices in his head telling him to hurt people, and that the knife was intended for himself.
How long do you think you and Jamie were there prior to Nation coming home?
10, 15 minutes maybe.
Okay. I know you told me last time that you this knife you carried in your bag, the bag was on that stool there. How long had you think you were carrying that knife with you?
2-3 weeks.
Okay. And where did that knife come from?
I bought it.
Why did you buy that knife?
I was having a down day.
Okay. Nation had gone upstairs, and Jamie's in the kitchen at the table. And that's when you go in there, you recall grabbing the knife. Do you remember anything else after that?
I've been laying here and I remember shards of things.
Okay, what are you remembering now?
The only thing I remember is I just remember I was just stabbing her in the back.
I don't know how Nation ended up getting hurt.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Detectives then confronted John with his claims of having various serious health conditions. In the days after the attack, while he was treated in hospital, John's many secrets had inevitably come to light. First, they discovered that John did not have multiple sclerosis. He had been faking a weekly injection treatment for this condition for over a year. He had accepted the help of multiple friends, including Jamie and Nate, to manage his fake symptoms. John had also not undergone surgery to remove gallstones, though he did take up the Hahn's offer to have him recover from this surgery in their home the following week. Crucially, the surgeon removing his gallstones could not have spotted the lumps that they feared were cancer, which was his latest and most significant false claim. The week before Jamie's death, the Hahns had left on a weeks-long vacation to the beach. There, they had celebrated Nation's 27th birthday. The trip had been delayed a day, however, so the couple could first take John into the hospital for his oncologist appointment. After his gallstone surgery, they were both very concerned. John admitted to detectives that there had not been an appointment. He had left Jamie and Nate in the waiting room, then wandered the hospital for hours. When he returned, John told his friends that he did indeed have pancreatic cancer, but the doctors were hopeful.
You go to a doctor's appointment with Jamie and Nation to an oncologist appointment to do at one point.
Yes.
And what happened there at that doctor's appointment?
I just, I walked around.
When did that come about? When did you start telling people that?
2 weeks ago, I guess. 2-3 weeks ago.
What made you think the wheels were coming off?
I just felt like they were.
What about the gallbladder surgery?
It wasn't true.
Any reason you told your friends and family about that? Is it because of attention? I mean,
Maybe the other thing is that I don't really pay attention because I have a lot of wonderful friends.
right.
And that's the thing that greatly concerned me is I didn't need it
Right.
because
But did you like the attention? Or?
not really, no, I didn't.
Okay.
With so many of John's lies about his illnesses exposed, investigators began to narrow in on what they believed was the motivation. What did he gain from these lies about his health, unless he was trying to distract his friends from something more nefarious? As Nation, the rest of Jamie's family, and their large circle of friends mourned, Raleigh police began uncovering what they believed was John's real motivation for the murder, the financial fraud he had been committing for years. The Hahns had been unfailingly supportive of John. Years before, he had come out of the closet to them, knowing that they would love and support him for who he was, even while he feared that he would be rejected and judged by his own family. And so, when John needed work in the spring of 2010, Jamie sought to help him out once again. As her consultancy, Sky Blue, took on more work, Jamie decided that she could use John's help with finances and compliance. Basically, John tracked the donations and campaign funds, which required reports every 3 months to the Federal Elections Commission, the FEC. while Jamie focused on fundraising and campaign strategy. The following year, Jamie's decision to add John to her team seemed to pay off when Sky Blue was hired by U.S. Congressman Brad Miller for his re-election campaign. Unfortunately for Sky Blue, the congressman suspended his campaign in the autumn of 2011, which left John and Jamie sorting out refund checks for the donors. Such was the state of things that April, when John, no longer on the payroll, was nonetheless still assisting Jamie in finalizing the Miller campaign accounts. However, the accounts were not exactly fit to be closed out. They should have contained almost $63,000, when in fact, the campaign account was overdrawn, with a negative balance of over $3,500. Jamie and the congressman's treasurer, however, did not know this. It seems that John Broyhill had been writing himself checks. The checks totaled more than $46,000. After dropping John back in Raleigh following his doctor's appointment, Jamie and Nate left for the beach. On the way out of town, Jamie received a call from Congressman Miller's office, informing her that a check written from the campaign account had bounced.
Hi, this is Jamie Hahn, Brad Miller's campaign.
Yes, ma'am. Can you give me that account number? We got your check. The problem is it bounced.
It what?
It bounced. Check number 3971 for $591.10 from Time Warner Bill.
Yeah.
It bounced. We received it on. It looks like we received it on April the 8th.
Yeah.
And today your bank saying no good. Nobody in there.
Okay, well, let me double check on that for you, and I'll be back in. I'm not really sure what's going on with that because it's got plenty in there.
Based on John's reporting, Jamie believed the campaign account had more than enough funds. She decided that the returned check must have been a mistake. John's shocking and serious health issues had been the cause of repeated delays in completing the updated reporting required for the campaign account. Completing the latest quarterly report would have definitively revealed John's embezzlement of tens of thousands of dollars and the betrayal of his closest friends. But John's web of lies was falling apart even without the report. If he was purposely avoiding this work, he must have known that he would succeed only in delaying and not preventing the Hahns discovering the truth. A handful of donors had reported missing their refunds. The FEC was getting involved and asking questions. Their report was late, and it had discrepancies. They were missing thousands of dollars.
A couple of questions about the embezzlement of the Brad Miller campaign. Were you short on a bill, or? Okay. Just living beyond your means, or?
Closer to dinner or
You giving the money away, or is it all on yourself for yourself? So just clothes, going out to dinner.
frivolous stuff.
The discovery of John's embezzlement provided investigators with what they believed was financial motivation for the murder of his boss, Jamie, and attempted murder of Nation Hahn. This would be the theory presented by the prosecution at trial. Jamie must have been pressuring John about the missing funds. On the day of the murder, she confronted him, which led to the attack.
Jamie was part of our campaign. She was one of those who was asking more and more aggressive questions, more and more insistent questions of John.
But John told detectives that he was not concerned about being found out. His friends will forgive him. He was preoccupied with his own depression.
You think this was brought on by this money situation, or?
To be honest with you, sir,
Right.
I've honestly given that a lot of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was just that, I would have faced it, and I would have faced the consequences.
Thinking of hurting yourself, is that coming about because of the money situation?
No,
Did you ever think about telling me the truth?
yeah, I mean, I would.
Why didn't you?
That's a great question.
How do you think they would have responded?
In time, they would have understood. I think.
How do you think they would have responded to you being honest with them about the embezzlement issue?
I think they would have understood.
On Sunday, the 14th of April, roughly a week before the murder, John had purchased the large chef's knife before driving to the Hahn's residence to finalize the quarterly financial report with Jamie. John simply lied at that time and told Jamie that everything had been filed, which it had not. He must not have been pressured about the money on that date, the prosecution claimed, because he did not use his knife. He would carry the weapon around with him in his backpack for another week before deciding to use it. Shortly after midnight the night before the murder, John used Nation's credit card to purchase a one-way airline ticket from Charlotte to Las Vegas, departing Monday afternoon. He canceled his flight reservation 1 hour before takeoff. John opted instead to purchase a one-way train ticket from Raleigh to Charlotte, departing Tuesday morning. Police saw this as his escape plan.
This jury will learn that the defendant also receives medical treatment for self-inflicted injuries to both the wrists and his abdomen he administered right before the Raleigh police responded to Jamie and Nation's house that awful afternoon. This will mark, in truth, the first time that entire year the defendant ever sees any doctor. As you will learn, the defendant makes recorded admissions to investigators, confessing to lying about having MS, to lying about having gallbladder surgery, to lying about having pancreatic cancer. He will admit to embezzling thousands of dollars from Congressman Miller's account. And you will hear the defendant admit to stabbing Jamie with the knife he'd recently purchased and brought concealed in his backpack to her house that afternoon.
The most insightful and compelling testimony at trial was offered by Jamie Hahn. He spoke first about how he had come to know his wife and how they had been such close friends with John Broyhill. He told the jury about how convincing John's lies had been and how concerned both he and Jamie had been for their friend.
I led him into the living room and, I was asking him what was wrong, and he was crying. Finally, he calmed down. He sat down on the couch, and I asked him, what's wrong? And he said, well, I went for my post-op visit with the doctor today. And he sort of choked up. He said, that they found a spot. And then he started crying again, and he said, it's because they think I have pancreatic cancer. She was very, very upset because someone that we considered so close to us was facing what seemed like a death sentence. I remember through her tears, she turned to me and said, don't you think we should have a baby? It was really the first time she ever brought it up so distinctly. And I just remember her saying, I want our child to know all the people that we love. And this just, basically that this drives home that the people we love may not always be with us.
Nation was asked to recount what had transpired on the day of the attack. He began by explaining how he had returned home from work. John was already at the house. Jamie was in her home office, visible through the glass doors and speaking on the phone. He greeted John in the kitchen.
So I went over, gave him a hug, asked him how he's doing. He said, yeah, I'm doing okay. I asked him, are you going to stay with us tonight? Because his procedure was, I think, scheduled for 7:30. And he said he thought so. He said he had his clothes packed with him in case he did. And it was just a normal conversation. I said, I'm going to go upstairs and change and go on a run or go to the gym one. And I went upstairs.
While upstairs changing, he heard Jamie scream his name.
And she called my name. She screamed Nation. But she also screamed John. My immediate assumption was that something had happened with him. the way she was screaming his name, it just sounded like it just sounded like something like he passed out or something. So I started proceeding through the bedroom as quickly as I could, threw open the door. She was still alternating her names, screaming mine as if sort of calm, screaming his in a different way. I was halfway down the stairs, and I was yelling "what" as I ran, or "what's happening," or I was halfway down the stairs, and she screamed out, "He's trying to kill me." And John was standing over her with a knife. He immediately turned and proceeded towards me. Or he pulled the knife up, and then he sliced it towards me, and my immediate reaction, as best I can remember, was to try to grab the blade, or to grab towards it because it was coming towards me. And we immediately started sort of wrestling. I was trying to get the blade from him. At the same time, I was hitting him sort of open face with the palm of my hand, screaming at him, "What are you doing?" And no response. I was also screaming at Jamie to get out of the house.
No one, including the defense, was arguing that John had not killed Jamie. But there was a crucial distinction between the two scenarios being presented. Did John plan the murder in an attempt to cover his embezzlement scheme and other lies? If so, he must have caused himself harm only after the attack, as law enforcement surrounded the house. Alternatively, had Jamie gotten off of the phone in her office and walked into the kitchen to find John attempting to hurt himself, she would have intervened, calling his name in concern, followed by her husband's name for help. Then, in a tragic but unplanned move, John, in a state of emotional distress and irrationality, turned the knife on Jamie.
Nation said, "I called back twice." What? Before he gets downstairs. And it's not until he's getting up off the bathroom when he hears the screaming. He's got to put his pants on. He's got to get down the stairs, because it's not until he's on the stairs that he then hears, "He's trying to help, he's trying to kill me." That's the first time he hears that. So what was going on before that? John wasn't trying to kill her? Or was he trying to kill himself?
John's defense argued that his refund of the airline ticket to Las Vegas is proof that he did not plan the murder. If he was going to kill Jamie and Nation, why ensure that they were refunded the money?
Going over there to kill her? He's going over there to kill her and Jamie? Why is he putting her money back on their credit card at 3:44 in the afternoon right before he goes to the house? Oh, it's important before you kill somebody, you got to put their money back on their credit card? Why would you do that? If you're going over there to kill somebody, if you're going over there to harm somebody, why are you putting the money back on their credit card?
The jury found Jonathan Broyhill guilty of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, inflicting serious injury. Nation spoke to his former friend directly at his sentencing.
You can't cut her spirit out with that knife. And you couldn't stop her love for you even if you tried.
For the first-degree murder of Jamie Hahn, with deliberation, premeditation, and malice, I order you incarcerated for the remainder of your life without the possibility of parole.
John appealed the conviction, arguing that the court should have allowed the testimony of Dr. Badri Hamra, a psychiatrist with the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, who treated John 15 months after his arrest. Dr. Hamra had diagnosed John with a series of mental disorders. He had been treating and medicating him for anxiety, depression, and psychosis.
We think if the jury had heard this testimony from Dr. Hamra, the jury would have more likely returned a verdict of second-degree murder.
The prosecution countered that evidence of emotional distress or psychosis at the time of the attack was irrelevant, because there was substantial proof that John had planned the murder at least a week in advance.
Prior to this attack, on a night that he would actually later go to the Hahn's, he purchased an 8-inch chef's knife near a grocery store near their house that he would eventually use to kill Jamie and injure Nation. The night before, he made plans to leave Raleigh. He had that knife for the whole week, yet he didn't use it to commit suicide.
The appeal was denied. In late 2013, Nation, alongside family and friends, launched the Jamie Kirk Hahn Foundation to honor Jamie's memory. The foundation seeks to support and inspire emerging leaders through scholarships and other initiatives. About the foundation, Nation wrote, "We are champions by the fight that we show and by the character that we show. That's how Jamie lived her life, and she tried to give that same strength and that same care and that same compassion to others." Nation went on to become a founding member of EdNC, which works to expand educational opportunities for students in North Carolina. Jonathan is currently serving out his sentence in Harnett Correctional Institute in North Carolina. At the time of publication, he is 41 years old. And that was the tragic story of Jamie and Nation Hahn and the conviction of Jonathan Wayne Broyhill.